First got to hear about the clinical case presentation that happened, because it is these kind of cases where there is a lot of human suffering, several axis 1 conditions, and as well as personality problems, where a case such as this, a therapy such as this, can be actually applied. Dialectics basically talk about synthesis between opposing realities that exist in the universe and the interconnectedness in the world. Historically, it came about in about the 1960s or so, when Marsha Linehan had more or less an aha moment in a small Catholic church, where she said that maybe she can accept herself for whoever she is, with whatever problems that she herself had. She had a psychiatric problem and she wanted to accept herself. Though it was in the 1990s that it became a rigorous treatment modality. To be able to think dialectically, one has to be able to accept that even though there are major life events, change is something that is the only constant. For example, the dialectical behavior therapists make use of several kind of metaphors. For example, if there are lemons, make lemonade out of it. Or if there is a large, vast, silent ocean, to see the waves in them. Or to throw maybe a stone in a puddle and see the ripples in it. Or to practice acceptance when rules, circumstances, and situations are changing. Even in an individual, there are these kind of opposites that are there. But for example, there are times when one is impulsive and there are times when one can exercise control. Sometimes one is aggressive. There are times one is very calm and gentle. Sometimes one is tough. There are times when one is gentle. One also knows that there are times when one likes to be private, whereas there are times when one likes to share things. Dialectical behavior therapy was initially developed based on a biosocial theory, according to which an emotionally vulnerable individual is put in an invalidating environment, leading to several behavioral, interpersonal, cognitive, and self-instabilities. These instabilities lead to several manifestations, such as marked reactivities in mood and difficulties in controlling anger, impulsivities in different domains, such as self-damaging problems, suicidal behaviors, self-mutilating behaviors, frantic efforts to avoid rejection, identity problems, and unstable self-image, and transient stress-related paranoid ideation. Although it was initially developed for borderline personality disorder, it has now shifted and it is now used for other axis 1 conditions as well. According to dialectical behavior therapy, there are 3 distinct client characteristics that exist, or 3 dialectical dilemmas that clients have. These dialectical dilemmas are: the first dialectical dilemma is of emotional vulnerability versus self-invalidation, where the client vacillates between intense emotional suffering versus dismissing, judging, and ignoring the suffering. For example, these are clients who might have experienced a lot of sadness, but when they come to the clinical setting, they themselves ignore or say that they're not really having any sadness. The second dialectical dilemma that clients have is of active passivity versus apparent competence, in which the clients say that they are very passive in solving their own real life problems, while actively engaging others to solve them. This is very similar to Lazarus's concept of using an emotion-focused coping style. For example, a coping style would be of using substances, whereas having an active problem-focused coping strategy. The other dialectical dilemma they have is of tendency of others to overestimate the competencies and capabilities of these individuals. For example, these people who have this have a tendency of coming out as being quite competent and capable, which they may not actually be. The third dialectical dilemma of the client is of unrelenting crisis versus inhibited grieving. Such individuals experience normal day-to-day life as a series of major problems. For example, even going to the grocery store or maybe paying bills or meeting a friend is associated with a lot of tension and anxiety. While on the other hand, wherever there is actual loss or trauma, that creates a lot of difficulty and emotions for them. Just like there are dialectical dilemmas for the client, DBT is one of the few therapies that discusses therapist characteristics in terms of dialectics. The first dialectic is of being oriented to change versus being oriented to acceptance. So while on the one hand, the client is the therapist is highly non-judgmental, on the other hand, the therapist also makes progressive goals towards change for the client. The second dialectic the therapist shows is of unwavering centeredness versus compassionate flexibility. There are several times when the therapist has to see the chaos that the client is undergoing. So at that time, the therapist has to take a process of being highly rooted, while at the same time going with the flow and recognizing that the patient has certain maybe the patient has certain things and has to go with that. And finally, the third dialectic of the therapist is of being nurturing versus benevolent demanding. In that, the therapist's core phenomenon is of being very compassionate, kind, of being a coach, a teacher, and being very sensitive so that the client feels very validated. And on the other hand, of being benevolent, demanding, so that movement can occur. DBT has certain very specific goals. These goals are in a pyramid form, starting with life and life interfering goals and therapy interfering goals such as suicide, self-harm behaviors and therapy interfering behaviors, like what we saw in the previous case. One always starts with these kind of behaviors. Subsequent to that, in DBT, one moves to quality of life interfering behaviors and skill building, and then finally moves to decreasing the trauma and increasing self-respect. According to DBT, there are 4 stages of therapy. In the first stage of therapy, there are 2 things that are done. On the one hand, positive skills of the individual are enhanced, while on the other hand, therapy interfering behaviors such as resistance, coming late to therapy, non-compliance, etc. are decreased. This also includes life-threatening behaviors like suicidal behavior, deliberate self-harm behaviors, which are reduced. All quality of life interfering behaviors like psychiatric disorders in LISA with the treating team are reduced. To give you an example of a behavioral contract, you can have a look at a safety contract that is made right at the start, which has the signature of both the client and the therapist. If you look at this kind of a signature contract, you will find in this that the individual makes a contract to say that even if that individual does have any kind of urge to commit suicide, they would not act on those urges. Rather, they would get in touch with their support team or with their emergency contact or with the treating team and just go there rather than act on any urges, and also be part of the DBT team. Because in the Indian context, these things could be a little difficult and written contracts might be tough. One does need to be a little innovative and make verbal contracts. In stage 2 of DBT, the thing that is done, the goal that is done is to experience emotions fully. Here, the therapist helps the client to replace quiet desperation with normative emotions by reducing stress. And the work here is of decreasing emotional suffering. In stage 3, the goal is to build a usual life. So here the goals are to achieve respect for self, build life goals, whatever they might be, whether they are social goals or interpersonal goals, occupational goals, by increasing the happiness and sadness and greater fulfillment in day-to-day living. In stage 4, greater meaning in life is built from incompleteness to completeness. The client resolves a sense of incompleteness and moves towards freedom and contentment, building connections with others and the community. And joy is brought about in stage 4. So one moves across these stages, if you would see, from ill health to health. Coming to the methods of delivery of DBT, weekly individual sessions with the therapist is the first thing that is done. Weekly group sessions if possible, telephone coaching and therapist consultation team meeting. In the Indian setting, as far as possible, we try to have at least individual sessions. Duration of DBT is very setting specific. It's inpatient is different from outpatient, and it is also disorder specific. Coming to the actual practice of DBT, this is divided into two core skills. The first is change techniques and the second is skill training. Change techniques involves problem solving and validation methods, and there are 4 types of skills training which I'll be discussing. Looking at problem solving, this is basically done in terms of chain analysis, where we look at what contributes to ineffective behaviors and how these consequences of these ineffective behaviors, for example, taking a substance, makes them hard to be changed. An important part of this is the missing links analysis, which helps to identify what is the event and the consequence between these two. For example, if you look at the prompting event and the consequences and look at what are going on between these, the connections between this, maybe the actions, the bodily sensations, the thoughts, the events, and the feelings, you can identify the consequences a little better. The other change technique that is used is validations. Validations are the ways in which the therapist looks at the inherent values and the beliefs in an individual and moves with the client's strengths rather than the problems that they have. Since many clients come from invalidating environments and they have themselves invalidated themselves, it is very important to validate them so that they feel emotionally better. In dialectical behavior therapy, there are 6 levels of validations. In the first level, active listening and observing is essential by maintaining an attentive and interested stance. In second level, accurate reflection occurs by providing accurate summaries of expressed experiences. In level 3, the technique used is of articulating the unverbalized by communicating silences in the therapy so that the client starts feeling that the therapist is appropriately and actively involved in the therapy sessions. In level 4, the technique used is of validation in terms of past experiences so that the client starts to make sense of their actions in terms of past experiences and biological predispositions. So if you see the level 4 of validation, this is more or less like providing a formulation that seems to be making sense to the client. In level 5, validation occurs in terms of current circumstances so that the client starts to feel functional in terms of normalizing the behavior with respect to the current context. In level 6, radical genuineness occurs by treating the client as capable, effective, and reasonable rather than as fragile. The skills that are taught to the client are 4: mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotional regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness. Coming to the first of mindfulness skills, this is present throughout dialectical behavior therapy across all the other skills that we teach. So I thought I will begin with this first. This has been derived from Zen practices and is about finding synthesis between extremes on the one hand and about having greater focused awareness. So this involves basically having greater attention, observation, and description of the present moment without trying to change one's present experience, and of being more non-judgmental of one's present environment. So while it is about being having synthesis on one hand, it is also about being non-judgmental. For example, on the one hand, one has a logical mind. On the other hand, one has the emotional mind, and being able to find the synthesis between these. Or an intense desire for change on the one hand, and having acceptance of the moment on the on the other hand. A very important concept of mindfulness is the concept of the wise mind, according to which individuals have to access their inner wisdom, which says that, uh, which is basically a synthesis of the emotional experience that any event brings about and the logical thoughts associated with it. When they are able to find the synthesis, then they are able to basically experience reality for what it is. Some of the core mindfulness skills that one can use is understood by the acronym of FLOAT, which can be expanded as finding one's inner space, letting go of judgment, observing one's thoughts, being aware of your environment or where one is, and being thankful for one's environment. There are several mindfulness activities that one can do. One of the simplest activity one does and teaches one's client is studying the object. So, for example, choose any object in the room. For example, it could be in front of me, I have the bottle, so I would say choose the bottle. Or it could be an eraser, or it could be a pencil. So choose an object from the room, study it. How are its edges, shape, size, every color it holds, its texture. Run your hand through it. How does it feel? This brings greater awareness of the things around you. Another mindfulness activity is counting sounds and being aware of the sounds that is around you, like the sound of the fan, the sound of the wind, sound of people talking, sound of the breath that one is taking. Awareness of everyday activities. For example, washing dishes, gardening, watching nature, bathing, eating, and mindfulness breathing. Mindfulness breathing is the singular most researched activity that has been done and associated with different Axis 1 conditions, including substance use disorder, and often the starting point after which we start doing other clinical therapeutic tasks. Coming to the second skill that we use, distress tolerance skills. Now, we all know that pain and distress is something that is part of life and cannot really be avoided. So being able to tolerate distress is an essential and integral mental health goal, which in many people is impaired because of the circumstances and genetic biological basis that they have undergone. Distress tolerance basically refers to the ability to perceive one's individual environment without putting demands that it should be changed, or experience one's emotional state without wanting to change it or control it, or even one's thoughts and actions without trying to control it. Distress tolerance has been widely accepted or distracted using the construct of accepts, which basically means doing a lot of physical activities, making voluntary contributions, comparing with other people who are not as well off as oneself, using emotions that make you feel a little better, pushing away negative thoughts or distress using guided imagery techniques, and having positive thoughts that make one feel better. And another technique known as, which is very popular also, known as self-soothe, where all the 5 senses are used. For example, we have clients who use stress balls, or who use things like eat a good meal because that just makes them feel better that time, or wear a good dress, or do stargazing. Another technique that is used for distress tolerance is a technique called urge surfing, which in other ways can be just called riding the wave to its natural conclusion. It basically means rather than trying to distract, one needs to accept that painful feelings and urges will come and to just be aware of them, observe the natural ups and downs of emotions and urges, check the intensity, maybe on a rating scale of 1 to 10, and as one observes, periodically recheck the intensity, because at some point it is going to come down. One more technique that is often used is of pairing the stressful event that causes distress with a simple relaxation technique, which makes the person feel better. Coming to emotion regulation skills, extreme emotional experiences are often because of being in environments that prevent expression of true emotion states. For example, being in a family that expects all family members to keep a brave face and smile, when the individual would rather not smile if a person is using a substance, or when children are subject to parental conflicts and would rather they want to show their anxiety, but they're not. This can lead to feeling emotional invalidation and being judged. Emotions exist in a dialectic. For example, primary emotions like happiness, sadness, anxiety, being relaxed exist in dialectics, and so too secondary emotions like guilt, trust, and love. And it is important for other therapists to anchor the clients in these dialectics. Some of the skills that are taught are to identify and label emotions, decrease the frequency of unwanted emotions, identify obstacles to changing emotions, reduce reactivity, reduce suffering, and increase positive events. To increase skills aimed at changing emotions, one needs to check the facts, do the opposite actions, problem solving, coping skills, building mastery, and being more mindful of the current emotions. One of the ways in which emotion regulation can be done is to check the facts. What is the emotion? And to check the fact, one looks at what is the emotion that needs to be changed? What is the event prompting the emotion? What is one's interpretation, assumptions about the event? Is one assuming a threat? What is the catastrophe? Does one's emotion interpretation fit the actual facts? To give an example of this, let us look at the emotion anger. Anger can be described and labeled in several ways, like irritation, rage, bitterness, wrath, annoyance. There are several events that lead to the feeling of anger, like having a goal blocked, not having access to a substance, experiencing marital conflict, financial loss. One looks at the interpretation of the event that led to the feeling of anger, like being blamed, loss of respect. There are several biological responses associated with that, like muscle tightening, teeth clamping, hand clenching, face flushed, head feeling as if it will explode. And then the after effect of anger, like narrowing of attention, focusing only on situations that make you angry or made you angry in the past, sadness and social conflict. Coming to another technique that is used, the technique is of opposite action. For example, look at the emotion of sadness. One first looks at whether the emotion of sadness fits the fact, and then doing the opposite action of sadness, like getting active, avoiding, building mastery, having greater self-confidence, increasing physical activities, changing one's body posture to being more confident and being more mindful of the present emotion. Another thing for emotion regulation is accumulating positive emotions. To this, the first thing is to describe barriers to building positive emotions and then plan for positive events in the present moment, in the short term, and in the long term. Now, there are some times when emotions become really difficult to manage. At that time, the individual needs to be aware that it is becoming difficult, and suppressing or blocking them will only increase suffering. And it is at that time just important to have crisis survival skills. For example, access social support or the treating team. Coming to the final skills, interpersonal effectiveness skills is very important to have, which is aimed at building self-respect in social relationships, in reducing social isolation and having a greater social network. Enhancing assertiveness skills while being able to deal with interpersonal conflicts is very important. The way in which interpersonal effectiveness works is using the acronym Dear Man, where the individual describes what their interpersonal requirements are, expresses themselves very clearly, asserts themselves, and reinforces these requirements again and again if required. It is important to be mindful and stay in the moment, appear confident, and negotiate clearly and well. During these times in interpersonal situations, it's also very important to respect themselves and others. And this can be done by being fair, never over-apologizing, and sticking to values, as well as being truthful. Now, finally, coming to the area of substance use. There are few things that are very essential for the substance use population. The first thing is of dialectical abstinence, which discusses harm reduction rather than total abstinence as the first line of management. The second is of having a clear mind and community reinforcement, burning bridges and building new ones, and of alternative rebellion. When we look at the concept of dialectical approach to abstinence, here the individual needs to recognize, needs to recognize that there will be slips, and to minimize the damages associated with those slips, be more accepting and take a non-judgmental approach to relapse while using problem-solving skills to cope with dangers of overdose, infections, withdrawal, and harmful consequences. Recognize that urges and cues for relapse, which a person might have when abstinent, create abstinent reinforcers, which could be people or activities, and get rid of things, cues, information, and people that are reminders of the substance, which is known as burning the bridge. A concept that dialectical approach to abstinence talks about is abstinence sampling, which is very similar to the 12 steps just for today program, according to which individuals commit to a particular time period, which is within reach. For some people, it could be just 5 hours, 5 days, maybe just 5 months. And this is something which they are very sure of committing to. And at the end of this time period, the client renews this commitment again with a surefire commitment time period. And this is again and again made longer and longer. Dialectical behavior therapy also describes what is known as different states of the mind and how individuals with substance use problems move between the addict mind and the clean mind. An addict mind is one which is completely under the influence of the substance, and all the thoughts, behaviors, and patterns are one which is completely impulsive and drug-related. While the clean mind is one which, when free of the substance, is oblivious to the habitual behavior problems of the substance. Whereas the clear mind is one which accepts that relapse is not impossible and plans for temptations. The clear mind is also one which has strategies, emotional skills, abstinence methods at their disposal. So the strategy that a DBT therapist employs is to move from clean mind to clear mind. And the way in which we do that is to identify irrelevant behaviors in the past that led to lapse and relapse, to think that one individual can control one's substance use, to have strategies to prevent lapse, thinking one's behavior, one does not have a problem, to being accepting of it, to stopping or cutting down the medications for substance use, to being more committed about taking it, and from being in addiction environments or seeing friends who are addicted to being in more non-addicted social environments. Finally, coming to the evidence and what that evidence tells us. There have been several case studies and small research studies in the area of dialectical behavior therapy. But when we come to randomized controlled trials, there have been about 29 RCTs by 21 independent research teams. And it has been recognized by American Psychological Association as the method for treatment for borderline personality disorder. It is part of the NICE recommendation. DBT adapted interventions include for DBT adolescents are very well documented. Although it was initially developed for borderline personality disorder, it is now also used for eating disorders, depression, bipolar disorders, HIV, and several comorbid conditions across different age groups. When we specifically look at DBT for substance use disorders, the research is limited, though it is present. And we find that it is of two types. One is personality disorder with substance use disorder comorbid conditions, as well as standalone substance use disorders. In this area, there have been about 9 randomized controlled trials which have been present, which all show that DBT is more effective than treatment as usual. It has also been done with several different types of cultural contexts. Finally, concluding and talking a little bit about what DBT holds in the future, I would say that DBT has more than 60 strategies that can be adapted to an individual client's needs. And research is now moving towards incorporating DBT in family and marital contexts where an individual with a substance use has a problem. Brief DBT is also being used on a public health basis, since that is extremely required, and since DBT is a very long intervention. Specific techniques of DBT are also being used, for example, just emotion regulation skills with other types of therapies like cognitive behavior therapy. So with that, I'll come to an end of my presentation.